Alright, so now, where do we start? Well, if we see this effect, and I had this in my mind, right? So I didn't have this image yet. But I wanted to have like a low camera, like a view from a person. The camera is kind of the height of a person holding the camera. The eye view, it's kind of the camera. And I had this idea of having like nothing on this side. I didn't want anything here because I didn't want to crash the car onto something else. Uh, because you gotta think this stuff up. If I crash the car in the middle of the street, like something here, like here, I'm gonna have to crash this building too, and it's gonna be more stuff to deal with. So you gotta know what you're gonna do before you even do it. So that's why I found this picture, and I was like, all right, this is perfect because I don't have anything here. The car can just fly out of frame, and I can just deal with the effects that are gonna be left on screen. And that's what I wanted, exactly that. Also, I didn't want anything blocking this side because the missile's gonna be striking from this side. So if I had a building here, well, the missiles is not gonna be able to shoot from there, right? So that's another thing. And yeah, that was exactly what I wanted. This picture, I found it on the internet, and this is the actual image I found. This is the actual image. There you go. So I found this image on the internet, and I checked that there's no licenses attached to this image. The image is free. It doesn't have any licenses attached to it, so I can use it for my stuff. It's something that you might check sometimes because an image on the internet might have licenses and restrictions, and sometimes you might get in trouble, or so why bother, right? Or you can just go outside and take your own image. So, and as you can see, this image is it's quite big. It's actually, I think this is not the actual image that yeah, I don't think this is the actual pixels of the image. That thing is lying. Details. I think this thing is lying because the image should be much bigger. All right, well, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for now. So I took this image, and I checked that it worked for me. I didn't need to clean up much of the stuff. I want to make the car just move a little bit and just hit the bit being hit by the missile and stuff. So I did that, and then I just grabbed the image and cut it into a frame that I could use, right? So let me just frame this. That's the whole frame. I just trim it to HD resolution, right? Because that was my plan to render this as HD as possible. So now I got this plate. Now what I do? What do I do? Well, I need to find my camera. I need to find a bit of a little bit of information about the image, and you can see that actually in this app, if I'm using Linux, so you might not have this app, or you might have it, which it's called just Image Viewer here in it's GNOME Image Viewer in Linux in Ubuntu. So you can see this image actually has some metadata details inside, which is sometimes useful, sometimes it's not as useful. Like it says that it has like a 1.8 lens, which it's kind of small for a lens, and so it's weird. Uh, so there's information about the camera, information about the image and stuff, which is sometimes very useful to have all this data. Sometimes images even contain like position information and stuff, time of day, which is useful because this is 11:46, which You can use that information for lighting the scene. You know where the sun is at that time. Mostly is like midday, which is gonna be like right on top. Uh, so that is useful. So now if we go to Houdini to actually position the image, uh, we don't need to track this image, of course. Be careful, guys, because I've had people ask me, like, how do I track a still image? And I'm like, why do you need to track a still image? You don't need to. Just put the camera, figure out the lens, and try to put it where you need it. It's not that hard with images. This image, for example, doesn't have that much distortion on it, so it's not that hard to set up. So just do it by hand. We are artists, so we can do that stuff. So let's start in Houdini, and let's save this scene first, and I'm gonna put it in my projects. And I'm gonna use the same place I use for the project. I always create a hipster directory and call this mix missile strike tutorial version 1. So it's gonna be the first one, and the first thing I'm gonna do is create a camera. So control click on that. I'm gonna need this shot camera, and I'm just gonna lock the camera and move it around. But before I continue, I'm gonna add the image to Houdini. Here, just press D and press D over the viewport to get the display options, and go to background, and I have it here for some reason. I don't know why this guys got saved with this. Just gonna remove those. In the camera section, just click here to find your image. In my case, it's in the maps folder. You can see I had a few images that I consider for the project, but I ended up picking this one. So I just put that there, click the display background image, and there you go. It's displaying that there. So let's close this. Now, it's not fitting the image, right? The camera, you can see the red line there. Well, because we haven't changed the resolution of the camera. So go to the camera now and into the view tab and change the resolution to match the image, which is HD 1080. Now it matches perfectly, right? So now the other thing is the lens is the next thing you need to consider here. So if I just mess around with this, so delete that, leave it as default. So by default it's 50 millimeters, which is it's a big lens for this. I don't think this is a 50 millimeter image, but we don't need to guess just by looking at it. I'm not an expert on lenses, but I know some of it. And the thing that I like to know the most about cameras, remember I was talking about knowing stuff, it's the common lens sizes, like 18, 22, 35, 50, 75, 100, 200, 300. All those lenses are the most commonly used, let's say. And I would try those first because most times that will work. So, but by having that knowledge, you just go for that and say, okay, I know that lenses might be this size or this size, so I'm gonna try that. This doesn't look like a zoom image, so it might not be 100 lens. It might be a 35 or a 22 or something like that. I don't think that it's an 18 because it's not that fish eye or the form, so maybe a 35, you know. But if you have that knowledge and you know how the image gets recorded with the lenses, you just have a better starting point, right? So I created this grid to guide me. I'm gonna use it as being like the floor, and I just set the wireframe color to this very high green so I can see it when I'm selecting the camera. So I select the camera. I'm gonna try like a 35 first, and already looks like a better approximation. You can see the lines are going to the to perspective here, like the horizon is kind of like that. That is a bad line. The horizon line is kind of like around here, and I want my lines to go there. So 35 looks like a good thing. We can maybe make the grid even bigger and just try to match the grid with the features on the floor. Maybe see if that is kind of going. Moving the grid also helps. And right here I'm seeing that this grid is not kind of lining up with this line on the walk on the on the walk side here. So I might not be at 35 lens. So let's try at 20. So I know what I used. I use a 22. I'm not actually sure that this is a 22 lens, but it works very good with a 22. You can see if I line this, put this line with this line, these lines look like it's following those lines too. And that gives me an idea that this is actually close enough. And that's the other thing with non-moving images, that you can be like close enough, might be good. And you can see this line actually lines up with this part of this area where the plants are, kind of lines there, lines with this line here, this going there, over there. So I ended up using a 22, although the image says it's using a 5.8, which I don't know, I've never seen a lens that small. Um, so the other thing you can do is maybe create a box. I do this a lot with a box. Just place it on the floor, make it bigger, like 3, and 1.1, I'm sorry, 1.5 here, just to keep it on the floor, and move it back and forth, just like this. Does it seem like it's actually deforming correctly? Actually, it does. Look at that. It seems like it's working with your scene, right? It's getting the right depth there. Seems like it's working. So this is what I'm gonna use. And the position of the camera, well, we see that we're actually kind of like in this side of the street. We're standing on the side, on the walk side, and we're taking the image from there. So just try to do that. Try to say, okay, I'm that person there. Where's my camera? How the camera it's being held, kind of like that. Let's put the box here and see. All right, is the box deforming as it should? This kind of should go through the car there, and that seems pretty damn close, right? So I'm gonna use the parameters that I already have defined for my camera. but that's what I ended up using. Just if you want to use what I'm using, just go ahead. But just try to find your settings and say, all right, that looks good enough for me. That's what I'm gonna use. And mine should be, maybe it's not as good as yours. Maybe yours might be better. And you can see that that last part, I actually rotated the image a little bit on this axis, because you can see the I don't know if the street is kind of going up or the guy who was holding the camera a little bit tilted, but you can see that there's a like a down uphill line here, so I tilted the camera a little bit in that direction. So now if I take the box that I have there, let's say that the box is gonna be here. Does it seem like it's working? Yeah, it seems like it's working to me. And since the car is not gonna be moving all the way here, it's just gonna move like a little bit here in front of us, so I think that should work for us pretty cool. Alright, I think that works. It goes in these sides, these directions are okay. Gonna remove this translation, make the grid size kind of like that. So just checking again. Yeah. So remember I made this box huge, which is taller than this car, which is actually being pretty close. I like the size of this. And this is looking like the perspective lines are going exactly like I want them to go. Something like that. And meeting here, which is exactly what I wanted. So okay. And now that the camera it's set up, where we're gonna commit to this settings, I'm just gonna lock this parameter so we don't mess this camera. Maybe even lock the pivot point, and lock the focal length too, so we don't move any of these things. There we go. All of that should be fine. Now the other thing we're gonna do here before we finish this chapter is setting up the scale of the scene. It is so important, because I've seen so much people just go ahead and say, this is a box, let me just create a new box. Alright, that box is so small, I'm just gonna make it huge and go ahead and do stuff with this huge box. And that box is huge. You're not considering the scene size and anything, the Houdini units, which is very important for me, or I know a lot of people find it really important, especially when you're doing simulation, because simulation is something that must look real or realistic enough to fit into our world or whatever world you're creating. And if you have the wrong units, it might be weird, and you're gonna be tweaking parameters by hundreds or thousands in the parameters, and you're gonna be wondering why is looking like cartoony or too slow or something like that. So remember that if we go to the preferences and the HIP file options here, remember the Houdini 1 unit is 1 meter, and one unit of mass is 1 kilogram. So this is very important to me. So what I have here, I'm going to import a model that I use for this. Actually have it on my gallery already for use it always. This is a simple human that I have, so I'm just gonna drag it here. And what I have here is a person that it's roughly 1.8 meters in height, and that is going to be my reference. You can see if I move this guy looks like it fits inside that car. It's kind of there. If I put this guy here on the walk side, yeah, that seems like a normal sized guy. Let's put it on the other side of the street. Should be somewhere around here. So yeah, that looks like a person that could be in this environment. So it's really important. I always put this guy here, and it's always reminding me that what the scale of the image of the scene is. So how I did this, I just took a box. If you don't have a human figure, just search something on the internet or just model something yourself and keep it as a reference. If I have like a cube, which is 1 unit of size, that means that a cube is 1 meter long, right? So if I go to the top view, you can see 1 unit is 1 meter, right? So kind of like it's one is if I make it two on Y and put one here just to keep it on the floor. Go to perspective view. That is gonna be my height. All right. So you can see that don't get confused by these lines because there's a line every 0.1, not every 1 unit. So 2 lines are actually 1 unit. So the grid lines are 0.51, 1.12. So you can see if I move the cube by 0.5, it's at the first line, and I move it, I cancel that by by one unit. Now the center is here at the second line, right? This is the middle line, and this is the other axis, X and C. So I'm gonna put it back in the center. So this is the 2 meters height, which is depending on where you live, right? So a person could be that height, that tall, but I just trim it down a little bit. You can see my human is, can put this guy here. It's not as tall as that. It's just like 1.8, and actually my human is actually below the floor. There we go. Like this human is like 1.8 meters long, 6 feet, around there. So just having this will always remind you, all right, am I doing this too big? Am I doing this too large? What am I doing? So this is your guide. This is what you are gonna be using as your guide to do the place your objects and stuff. Don't just estimate your settings. Just make references, take measurements. If you took this image yourself, you can go and say, all right, if I measure this post here, this is like 3 meters in height. I can make a reference of 3 meters, and when I match that image with my camera and my geometry that I know is 3 meters tall, then you are super close to having a better match camera, right? So do that. That's super cool. If when I'm ever on set on stuff like that, I measure all kinds of stuff. So I measure the distance between 2 points and the height of stuff, the width of stuff that I can later use for reference. All right, I think the only other thing we're gonna do here is just save this. That's important. All right, so we're gonna make a little bit of cleanup here. This grid, I'm gonna call it floor, so we can use it later for a floor. We already have it there, so it's a good thing that we have that. This is scale reference object. I don't want to use it. I can just hide it, or And this simple human, I don't want to select it, so I just click this green flag tag there, and I can't select him anymore. And that's it. We have our scene prepared. Now in the next lesson we're gonna start dealing with the actual elements of the destruction of the scene.